All right. How's it going, everybody? I wanted to check in here. Things were crazy yesterday. I know I kind of missed the ball on a live after the sentencing, but things just get so crazy with everything going on, the fatigue of being in court all day, the various interview requests I'm kind of fielding. I did do a sit down interview at a studio last night, so that kind of kept me out of pocket for a little bit. But I realized I probably missed a good chance to just go live right outside. But as everybody heard, it was a 10-year sentence, and I hate to disappoint, but I don't know how long I should actually make this, because one issue that I deal with is being somebody who doesn't just sit here all day and just talk online about trials that are being streamed online. I do my own reporting. I'm not. I don't have an assistant to kind of run around for me. So I know everyone is really interested in the letters, and of course, so am I. So that's one thing I kind of need to get on today, is getting those. So I'm going to be working on that. But I was going through my notes and just pulling out some good quotes, and really what I'm going to do is just kind of sum everything up, because I've said in interviews that you really want to empty your notebook on this whole thing. But I see somebody saying to take a break, and yeah, I mean, I just kind of slowed down, because normally I would have tried to get an article out last night and everything. But and part of me does just want to reserve this coverage to just this 1 week, because I mean, he was sentenced, like, this is over, right? And I know, I mean, all the discussion from just Megan's statement, and then the prosecutor's press conference, which, by the way, I got a video of that. I wasn't able to make it to that, but they filmed it all, so I've got that up on my YouTube. But they were just talking about, they hope that this brings closure to Megan. So the idea that we would just keep covering this, it's like we need to all kind of back away from it. But Jose Baez says that he's going to be bringing a motion for bail pending appeal, and that's going to be heard on August 15th, next week, which that really has like no chance of passing at all. I mean, there's no way Hereford is ever going to grant him bail. I mean, it's just not going to happen. But Baez is just such an actor and kind of a showman, the way he was talking to the press yesterday. But the idea that I just wouldn't go to that hearing and not cover it when there's all this attention on it, I mean, of course I'm going to cover that. But I think after Hereford rejects the bail motion, it'll be pretty quiet after that. There's going to be a notice of appeal, but there would be a brief filed. Tory's lawyers would file a brief outlining their issues, but that's not going to be for like many months. I mean, it could be like 6 or 7 months. I don't know quite the timeline. So after the hearing on his motion for bail pending appeal, it really should be done. But really, I mean, it's done now. He's not getting bail pending appeal. And when I hear this stuff, I'm just like, how much is Jose Baez charging him for that motion for bail pending appeal? It's like, I mean, I don't know. And he's such a good showman at the way he does everything. But I know the letters are really important, so that's a priority. So I want to get all that together into an article. And once I get the letters and can kind of figure out a way to transport it, because one problem is they won't be in digital format. I'm going to go there and get them all in paper. So I'll just go to like a FedEx and get them all scanned in or something. But that's always kind of a pain. But just kind of figuring out a way to disseminate them to the public, because I just think there's so much interest in the case. I mean, we just had a 2-day hearing. We should have some closure on that. But I'm hoping that by Friday that this is exhausted, and I've done a story emptying my notebook. I've got notes on the various people who spoke for Lanez, the 7 people who answered questions. A lot of comments from Alex Bott and Kathy Todd, the prosecutors, because I mean, there was just so much discussion about Lanez. When Alex Bott got up to give his argument, he said, "You would have thought we were at a Man of the Year award ceremony here," and it was pretty accurate, because I mean, he had videos of a child, a display of childhood photos, collection of social media videos of him at turkey drives and people thanking him. And Alex Bott pointed out that there were actually a couple people in the video that was shown in the courtroom who were apologizing to Tory, saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry you're going through this," that kind of thing. I mean, and he pointed out Jose Baez, his Alex Bott pointed out Jose Baez's display of Megan's tweets. He had a couple of tweets, and then there was a video. The video didn't play, and I've got such bad eyesight, I couldn't read the tweets, although I think they were small enough that even if I had good eyesight, I wouldn't have been able to see them. So I don't know exactly which ones they were. I can try to find out that. But Alex Bott said that he almost fell out of his chair when he realized that they were comparing Tory's social media to Megan's social media. And he said, you know what Megan never did in all of this? She never shot anyone. And it was really kind of a dramatic moment. And then he also talked about the PTSD claim, because that was actually a new claim. And Hereford pointed out that the post-traumatic stress disorder argument from the lawyers, the argument that Lanez has post-traumatic stress disorder, was not in their briefs, which some judges would just say, well, then it's not in your argument then. But they had brought it up in the oral argument during the questioning of the doctor. And sorry, said that just said that he didn't believe that PTSD was a factor in this whole thing. The judge did. But Alex Bott, when he was arguing about the PTSD, brought up Megan's statement, and her statement began with how she hopes that people don't take her absence from the courtroom as anything else than her preserving her mental well-being. And Bott said that basically she wanted to be in court to give a statement, but she just couldn't stand the thought of being in court with Tory again. And he was like, how's that for PTSD? Like, it was really a dramatic argument about the whole thing. And he was talking about just the argument that Lanez should be on probation and he could be supervised because he can do all these good things in the community. And just the way Baez was kind of so over the top when he was when he was talking about this young man's unbelievable acts of kindness. It was just like, oh, give me a break, you know? And Alex Bott pointed out that the social media platforms that Tory's lawyers were talking about, oh, he can utilize these to do a lot of good for these charities. He's like, these are the same social media platforms that he was utilizing to have Megan harassed for 2.5 years. And especially just the way Judge Herriford has been. Monday, he made it clear that he thought the social media activity was a big aggravating factor. I mean, it was kind of a question of, should the prosecutors respond to these arguments from Baez more? But as I've said in other videos, I mean, Baez is a trial lawyer. He is used to arguing to, as some defense lawyers, which I'm sure Baez has heard this, 12 rocks in a box. It's the jury. They're not the judge. But the whole idea that this kind of argument would work on a judge was just kind of not there. So I think the prosecutors kind of knew that they didn't need to get up there and try to refute every single thing that these 7 people were saying, because one of the main people who testified that they brought in, this expert that Ed Welburn knows, she runs home sentencing, and he said that they've worked together on 30 cases or so. And I'm sure I hadn't heard of her personally, but I'm sure she's very well known in the state criminal case world in Southern California on the defense side. And she seemed very genuine in how she talked about how she owns or runs this home detention center that she thinks, not home detention, but a substance abuse center that Lanez would be a perfect candidate for. And that she even said that she would be available to actually pick him up from jail and take him there. And just the way she's talking, she seems so nice and genuine. And she was sitting at the corner gallery thing right behind the lectern. So Lanez is the mother of his daughter, who actually they did say in court that they're engaged. They called her Lanez's fiance. So that, I guess that came out. But when she talked again and left from the lectern, I saw Stephanie, the owner of this home sentencing place, kind of clutch Rihanna's hand and just kind of give her like a comforting pat. So it's obviously like very genuine. But in the end, the woman, Stephanie, she did this whole assessment of Lanez over the phone. And one thing that didn't come out was how much she was paid to do it, because obviously she's not working for free. She's a professional. She works with Ed Wellborn all the time. And the fees that these people take for this kind of stuff, it's a lot. I mean, it was probably in the tens of thousands of dollars that she got for this whole assessment that she did. I don't know if this was a jury that Baez was arguing before. The prosecutors definitely would be like cross-examining her about her findings, her lack of in-person interview with Lanez. And a lot of the times the questioning in that case opens with how much were you paid, and that, oh, you work with Ed Wellborn all the time, because this is a jury that you're arguing for. But they didn't have an opportunity or really asked to do any kind of questioning like that. But also, did they even really need to do that? I think there was a little bit of questioning here and there, and Hereford had offered to allow some questioning of somebody that he didn't think, matched what had come in or something like that. But prosecutors didn't really take him up on that, because there was just kind of no need. I mean, the idea that this would have worked on a judge to convince somebody to do a really unusual case like that, and or an unusual exception like that, and going with probation. But somebody said they'd never heard of an assessment costing that much, and it wouldn't be just the assessment, like just the phone call she charges tens of thousands of dollars for, but those 2 days that she spent sitting in court. I mean, she's charging by the hour for that stuff. Like they're all getting paid by the hour for that whole 2-day hearing that we had. So saw a question come in. Are you able to state 3 positive facts about Lanez and his defense team? I think Baez is a really good trial lawyer. I mean, he would have been better at trial than George McDesian. I think Wellborn was good for them in that he understands the law and has a lot of experience. The expert that he brought in that was better than nothing. And she's very well respected. She, like I said, she really, really came across as very genuine and nice. And she believes in criminal justice reform and sentencing alternatives. And I think bringing in Ed Wellborn was a good idea. I like Ed Wellborn. I mean, I was like, oh man, if some of the people online who just are convinced that I'm the enemy or something knew that Ed Wellborn had acknowledged me, there would probably be some drama or something. But I mean, they really put up a good fight for him. But it's kind of funny to me that people that Lanez's fans just approach this from the standpoint of they couldn't possibly be doing anything but everything that's exactly right for Tory. I mean, they left the courthouse, smiling and grinning, Barhoma and Baez did. And the idea that he ever would have gotten probation for this or anything like that was just so far-fetched. They made an argument, but whether it was a good one and whether it really had any chance of persuading the judge, I think was really not all there. Let me see if there's. I know there's a bunch of questions in here, but it's kind of hard to get things. One thing, just some facts that I tweeted out. He is going to be credited for, I think it's 305 days that he's already of time already served, and it's like 203 days that he's already served in jail, or 231 maybe, and then he gets a 15% credit on top of that, so he gets like 30 free days or something. And then Hereford made the decision to credit him for the house arrest, which I think is discretionary on Hereford's part. But so that'll all be factored into his sentence. Let's see. I went through my notes here and just brought up some quotes. I'm hoping to get a transcript of this too, but Judge Herriford talked about how the shooting of Miss Pete has changed lives. He also said actions have consequences and there are no winners in this case. He said the law makes no distinction for celebrities and those who aren't. And he also said that the factual circumstances in this case are really not unusual, and that it's a scenario that the court sees all too often. Really. And that's the thing. I mean, most of the vast majority of Judge Hereford's cases are kind of these, I don't want to say garden variety because it demeans the victims in these cases, but the assault cases that you would see in Superior Court, he sees a lot of this stuff. So he has the background of all the other cases that he's drawn on and he can do. The press conference that the DA's office did, and I'll put the video on there. Both Kathy Taw and Alex Bott spoke at it. But one thing regarding the sentence, it was 6 years on the first-degree assault charge, and then 4 years for the enhancement. And one thing I've got to go through my notes and maybe ask the prosecutors, because it's a little unclear to me which enhancement was dropped. There was the great bodily harm and the use of a gun, and there's just kind of some technicalities to work out because it was really just such a long afternoon in court. But I was kind of talking with some other reporters about the details of it. But we all know it's definitely 10 years for count one and an enhancement, and then he imposed 2 years for count two, which runs concurrent, which means at the same time. And then he imposed 2 years for count three, which is actually stayed. He stayed that sentence, which to the mainstream, it doesn't really matter. It's like, look, it's 10 years, but I'm sure some people in the criminal defense realm, especially in like Los Angeles County Superior Court areas, would be interested in that or something. There's probably some reason for that. But let's see here. I think it's amazing how he almost got the bare minimum of a sentence. The minimum was 9 and he got 10. Yeah. And that's one thing I want to get into in the, if I kind of my final article on what actually the sentence was, because he could have gone down to the lower term, but he would have had to have found, exceptions, gotten rid of enhancements, found a reason to. So I saying it's a minimum of 9 years. That is what the prosecutor said, and they are right in that. Just in the facts or in the convictions as they had them and as they were arguing, that would be right. But he could have possibly found a reason to go down to 3 years or go down to probation, but he ruled probation out because, as we've said, he was presumed ineligible for probation, and they had to find some kind of exception to change that. And he didn't find, Judge Hereford didn't find any kind of exception. So the 3 years for count one, and Alex Bott was saying that that's more for garden variety. And he used, I think it's 245. He used the California code for it, but for these assault cases that are charged under that. And he said that if he had merely just pointed the gun at Meghann, he could have been charged with first degree assault. If he had actually just aided and abetted somebody who pointed a gun at Meghann, he could have been charged with first degree assault. And those are the kind of cases that you would see a low term sentence on. It's a first degree assault, but there's not the great enhancement of great bodily harm, that kind of thing. That would be a lower term sentence that you kind of see. But he said when this is 5 rounds and 2 of the bullets injured Meghann, and that reminded me from the trial, because that's not actually new information, but there's just so many details about this trial, and especially covering it before I was like immersed or forced to endure all this social media stuff about it. I mean, I'm just remembering now details that would be good to just kind of make clear on the public record, that 5 rounds fired from the gun, 2 bullets, fragments from 2 bullets hit her, that's in there. But he was just saying that this was pretty close to an attempted murder case. And that, I mean, he didn't say this, but if it was charged with attempted murder and he was convicted, this would be like a 25-year to life case. So he said it really doesn't get much more serious than what he did. And one line when Alex Bott was making his argument that he said a couple of times was, Meghann's luck is not Tory's luck. That is not the defendant's luck. He said Meghann's luck is not the defendant's luck. Like, she got lucky. Like, she could have died that night if it weren't for her own luck. He said this could be a murder trial that we're at. but she survived, and her luck should not be seen as the defendant's luck. And this is when they're arguing against one of the arguments that she shouldn't be seen as the great bodily harm enhancement, because Baez had brought up her total recovery from this. She's become a physical fitness guru and that kind of thing when arguing against that. But I mean, as Alex Bott said, the bullet fragments being removed by surgeons basically constitute that. Let me see here. Does anybody? Oh, here. I see here. I don't think he would have went with less. He wanted to make sure Meghann was okay with it, so 10 wasn't bad. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I just don't have the time to do all this stuff right now. But I want to go back to an old video that I did on the 13-year sentencing recommendation, because I say in there that my instinct was I don't think he's going to get the 13 years. I think he'll get something closer to like 9 or 10 years. And then in the way back when he was first convicted, I'm familiar with federal court sentencings, but just the superior court sentencing process I was a little unfamiliar with. So I messaged an attorney who's not involved in the case at all, but does a lot of cases like this, and asked, what kind of time is he facing? And he said he's faced, because of the conviction for first degree assault with a gun and the enhancement, that he was facing definitely double-digit time, probably close to the max. And looking back, I kind of consider that statement to be wrong, because I mean, prosecutors recommended 13 years, which I would argue is not close to 22 years and 8 months. It's not close to the max, but the double-digit time was right on. I mean, I hadn't talked to anybody who ever thought that this would be under 10 years, except for a friend here in town who does federal defense stuff and is really knowledgeable about criminal defense work, but he's not specifically knowledgeable about the facts of this case and all of the social media stuff. And, no criminal record on Lanez. The August Alsina stuff wasn't weighed in. The first degree assault with a firearm charge, but it's injuries to the feet. He was thinking, he was like, oh, he's not going to get 13 years. He's going to get 6 years. And I told him, no, I think it's going to be more than 6. And I said, I brought up the social media stuff, and that was a big thing for Judge Hereford. But it's not just social media. And I think it almost sounds like kind of downplaying it when we say that, oh, it's just like some posts on Twitter or something. It's like, no, this is how everybody communicates on this case. And it wasn't just posts on the internet. It was the songs that he made, and it was all of that. And it was always pretty apparent to me that struck a chord with Judge Hereford, because like most judges in trials, they don't have a lot of chance to do much other than sustain or overrule objections. But when the jury leaves, there's maybe some more discussions where you see him a little bit. And the discussion that they had before Lanez decided whether he would testify or not, and they were talking about things that the prosecutors would be able to ask him about. And McDesian was citing the California law that kind of changes the standard for asking criminal defendants about their artistry, like rap lyrics and that kind of thing, when saying that the prosecutor shouldn't be able to ask him about the Cap music video or anything. And Hereford was really quick on that to be like, oh, I think if it's about the case, it's relevant, it's coming in. And just the way he was kind of animated, I was like, oh, he doesn't approve of that, because usually he's just sitting there. He does his 2 fingers. He puts his 2 fingers like this and sits and listen, and you see him watch there's just not much of a chance for him to be too expressive during the trial. But he really seemed to not approve of that, of the song lyric stuff, and just how quick he was to say that it would be relevant. So the fact that he found that was to be a major aggravating factor. He'd made that pretty clear. One thing he did say was that he thought Lanez's community service and his charitable work was a mitigating factor. That was a circumstance in his favor. It's just he didn't do an exact balance of weighing it in the math or anything, but obviously when you see the 10-year sentence, it wasn't too much of a mitigating factor. But he did say that was a factor that worked in Lanez's favor. Let me put how victim services were involved in the sentencing, if at all, and what was the courtroom like when Megan's statement was read out loud. Victim services had a good showing, and I think I said in a live that they were prosecutors, or that they were definitely with the prosecutor's office, and I think a few of them for sure were with victim services, but you had 10 women sitting in the back of the jury box. And the DA's office presence in the case, kind of outside presence of just Alex Bott and Kathy Ta, really showed up during the like third court date for that motion for new trial, when it was like, okay, when is this stupid motion going to get rejected? And that's when the DA's office started making a presence in court for, I mean, it was basically for Judge Herriford kind of thing, but they had a big contingency there for the sentencing, and it was like 10 women in the back. And I'll link this up as soon as I can, but the DA's press conference, the victim's advocate spoke at that. And I talked on Spectrum News LA with my friend Kate, the host, this morning, about how unusual it is, or just what it says about the fact that Gascon held a press conference like that, because he is not exactly tough on crime. I mean, he was facing a recall attempt, and most of the time when I see him holding a press conference, it's because he's holding a press conference about a cop that he's indicted, or I mean, he's very, very criminal justice reform. So obviously Tory Lanez and his lawyers understood that and kind of knew their audience when they posted that voicemail on Instagram back in April, where he's kind of calling, or not kind of, he actually is naming George Gascon and his record of reform, and basically calling for him to drop his charges. So it was unusual and a very big showing by Gascon to have a press conference like that and back up his prosecutors. And all the statements are really all about Megan and Megan's bravery, and thanking him for her bravery. I answered that one, but somebody says, did they bring up the fact that he went against a restraining order when he went on stage at with the baby? Because 13 years makes sense for that. Yeah, prosecutors definitely brought that up. Judge Hereford didn't specifically address that. We never got to hear Judge Hereford say the term Rolling Loud Music Festival or DaBaby, but he did talk about the post-trial conduct. So prosecutors had brought that up and their papers, and then Alex Bott had talked about it. And he actually said that Lanez was wearing a disguise and got up on stage, and they revealed it was him. And Alex had various things to say, like about what that did to Megan, that I think I've got some quotes on in here that I've still got to go through. But yeah, all that stuff was definitely a factor. Hereford did say that the August Alsina thing wasn't something that he was considering, but the other post-trial conduct was. One interesting thing, because I think kind of the simple way to sum this up is that, some people might say, Lanez's lack of remorse really played into this. But as I said earlier, Judge Hereford actually, legally ruled that he wasn't going to consider the lack of remorse. And one thing I should make clear in an article is, it's not like if you say you didn't do a crime, you take it to trial and you get convicted, and then you don't just admit that you were guilty. Like that's not a lack of remorse. There has to be an earlier statement or something in which you basically confess to the crime. So that's why when you read the prosecutor's papers about the lack of remorse, they point to his phone call to Kelsey and his text message to Megan as saying that those are admissions, that we can base lack of remorse on the fact that he admitted back then that he did this, but then he fought it along the way, because it's of the realm of wrongful convictions, that kind of thing. You shouldn't have to just admit that you did something because you were convicted. There's just kind of a more complicated legal balancing test that goes into that. And Judge Hereford mentioned, he didn't actually mention the case, I don't think, but he said there's recent appellate decisions on this, that he just thinks that if he found on lack of remorse, the appellate court wouldn't agree with him. But that he basically assured prosecutors that because he was considering the post-trial conduct to be a huge aggravating factor, that it wouldn't really matter. So let me see if we've got more chats in here. If I'm missing anything, sorry. It's just been kind of a busy busy, crazy day. But yeah, I know the letters are really important, and it's just kind of a timing thing too. I mean, I definitely would love to just take a couple days off, but I don't want to be into next week and still just be doing tons of stories on this. It's like he was sentenced, it's over. There's that motion for bail next week that I am going to cover just because there's so much interest in this, and I do think it's a good way to keep teaching people about the court system and the ways that lawyers operate. But I mean, I don't want to just keep reporting on this. I was gonna say beating a dead horse before I realized that maybe that wasn't the best pun to make, but it reminded me that I need the problem with none of this stuff being digital. I mean, there's all this paperwork, but Baez did say something over the last 2 days that I'm like, oh, did I miss that? Is that what that was? But he said there was an affidavit. I think it was with the supplement motion for new trial, but it was from like a videographer who worked with Lanez on the Cat music video. And he said that this guy wrote a declaration saying that the Cat music video has nothing to do with Meghan and that those aren't horse legs. I was like, oh, well, I mean, I must have just overlooked that, but I must have it somewhere. I was like, oh, I should dig that out because, yeah, people would be interested to see that because what? Yeah, I mean, that would be something to put online, but it's all just a kind of matter of just finding time to do it. I don't know if there's really else to do. Oh, one thing, gosh, people are so obsessed with that. Oh, you got these journalists kicked out of the court. It's like, no, I didn't, dude. I've addressed that like a million times. And I mean, I did an interview on that. I think was it with Darnell or him, where I kind of talked about it a little bit. Where it's kind of bullshit that they got kicked out. And I mean, the court. I mean, it is kind of an overreach on the court's part. But I'm like, what did they do to try to get back in and like challenge that decision, other than just complain about it on YouTube? I mean, they just like turned it into a live fest instead of like standing up for the rights of press. And I said, I mean, I definitely agree that the new age media, we should all be, traditional journalists and new media journalists, we're all kind of together in the same rows. But when we have those new media people getting their freaking rights violated by the court and then just like not even doing anything to stick up for themselves. I mean, that was an LA Times reporter. They'd probably have their general counsel call in or something, which is just easier said than done. I mean, it's not like you'd have to call a lawyer and do that kind of thing. But I'm like, did these guys like do anything to try to get back in the courtroom, or are they just going on live and blaming me for it? It's like, fuck you. So, this is a good one. So are you going to apologize if it ever comes back he was innocent and wins in his appeal? Yes. Yeah. No, I will say right now, if it comes out, if there is actual proof that he is innocent, I will say, I mean, I'm not really sure I have anything to apologize for, but yeah, I mean, I would, if he wins his appeal, I will apologize. But I'm just going to say Baez is obviously still in charge and he's going to be navigating the appeal. But if he thinks he can get up there before an appellate court and do that kind of showmanship, I mean, you can, but it's just not going to get you anywhere. But this is a young man who has an alcohol problem and he deserves saving. It's like, oh, come on, dude. I mean, it's just that stuff will work with a jury maybe, but I mean, you just go back to the Casey Anthony case where he got his start, his whole opening statement about how she drowned in a pool, and he even reenacted the Casey Anthony's father, angrily saying, "This is your fault." I mean, the guy's just like this theater nerd. It's like, what is this kind of fan fiction stuff about your clients? But somebody says, I know people say there's no basis for an appeal, but if he is granted an appeal, should the public be upset? One thing, he will definitely get an appeal. Like, it's not a matter of, it's not like the Supreme Court where you have to petition them and ask if your case can even be considered by them. And then, they say yes to like 1% of cases, and then the appeal gets briefed. You'll automatically appeal it. And actually, California allows anyone who appeals a case, they should be able to get oral argument. It's like 10 minutes of oral argument before the court. So he'll definitely appeal. It's just a matter of, is he going to actually get anything granted. And I'll be interested to see what issues they argue here, because the way they set it up in the motion for new trial, it definitely, you got the impression that you could almost tell if you watched the trial and then read the motion that the people who wrote the motion weren't actually at the trial, because just the things that they said were so important and that really churned the jury. It just didn't really match the vibe of the trial. And what a lot of things in the appeal are going to come down to, judge's discretion. The judge has a lot of discretion in the decisions that he made. And when Judge Herriford says that, first of all, he doesn't think any of the issues raised there are errors, but that if any of them were, they aren't big enough to overturn a jury verdict. So the things about like the Instagram comment being allowed, the shade room Instagram comment where Tory Lanez comments that's not true to the Kelsey thing. First of all, as I said in the interview I did yesterday, that was actually Tory's lawyer, George McDesian's most effective cross, where he really hammered the police lieutenant who introduced the comment as evidence about the fact that Tory might not have actually written that he could have social media people who are writing things for him. And I mean, like I said, I thought it was the most effective cross. And if you go back to my tweets from long ago, I talk about that, but I also talk about like, big deal. I mean, it just seemed like really kind of a small thing in the bigger picture. And that's what Judge Hereford said in his motion for a new trial ruling, that he thought these were really small pieces of a larger puzzle. So the court is going to put a lot of discretion on or a lot of weight on what Judge Hereford said there about the totality of the evidence. And one thing that's not good for them is how they kind of ignored and cherry picked the evidence on that. And Judge Hereford pointed that out in his ruling. He said his job as a judge is to look at the totality of it. So, I mean, the DNA evidence stuff, all this stuff was kind of actual small pieces of a larger evidence puzzle. And the appellate court is gonna rule into that. That doesn't mean that there aren't, maybe issues here that they will see or that kind of thing. There could be an interesting issue raised that comes up new, but I just don't see it. And one thing I was reminded of was let me finish answering the question. Somebody says if he is granted appeal, which let's just say that means if he is somehow given a new trial or something through this appeal, should the public be upset? And I would just argue, like, as kind of a law standpoint, no, because if they do grant that, it means that three, appellate justices who don't have any involvement in the case and aren't all gassed up on the shade room comments or something saw errors in it. And everybody should want him to be treated fairly, like as American citizens who, respect our justice system. I mean, if you are a big fan of Tory, you want him to be treated fairly, but people who want him to be convicted and do his time should want him to be treated fairly too. And it's almost not worth talking about too much, just because I don't think there's really much of a chance of it happening. But no, I don't think people should be upset if that happens. And one thing to keep in mind is the idea that he would be released if that happens, I think is questionable. But I don't know. We'll see it when it happens. And like I said, they're going to have to find somebody else to argue before the appellate court other than Baez, because appellate court justices are not going to be all into this. What are your personal thoughts on Iggy Azalea saying 5 years was too much for this type of crime? And I'm wondering, does that mean that somebody else already has like all the letters on it? It could. I haven't actually seen her letter in full, so I'm gonna go up and do that. But I'm gonna do something on that later with all the letters, and we can kind of go through and see that. But yeah, if anyone has anything else, please ask it in the chat. But let me see if that has other people gotten the letters yet. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, and that's the thing with the evidence that happened. Some of it is just logistics of where you live in Southern California and the job, but the evidence exhibits in the trial were obviously such a huge thing when that came out. But I remember at the time, that was when I was with Law and Crime News, and they were just like not even really that interested in it. And they wanted me to do all these other stories. And to me, it kind of exemplified, the need to go independent and do my own thing. Cause I knew there was so much interest in that, but good for, it was what, Neek and Alex who got those first. So it kind of inspired me to make sure that I can get on the letters and everything, because I know that's important. But yeah, all the names will come out there. We'll get the gist on that. But thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll definitely do this again soon, and keep following me for updates and that kind of thing. So thank you all for tuning in. I'll see you guys later.